Welcome to Hong Kong Ghost Stories. Tonight, we leave the fog of Victoria Harbour and travel south, across the sea to Indonesia, to a city where parents lock their doors not against thieves, but against something far more patient. Something that knows your secrets. Something that watches when you forget. Picture this. The sun is setting over Semarang, a coastal city in central Java. The sky bleeds orange and purple. The air grows thick with humidity. And as the last light fades, mothers across the city call their children inside with urgency in their voices. They say in Semarang, when the sun dies and the evening prayer call echoes through the streets, a woman walks the steep roads of Bukit Gombel. She doesn't scream. She doesn't break windows. She just hums, a wordless melody older than memory. And if you've left someone small alone in the dark, she will find them. She will take them, and she will only return them when you prove you've changed. Her name is Wewe Gombel, and this is her story. But I warn you now, this is not a story about monsters. This is a story about mirrors, and what they show us about ourselves. Bukit Gombel rises like a warning above Semarang, steep, green, and wrapped in stories older than the colonial roads that cut through it. If you stand at the base of the hill at dusk and listen carefully, locals say you can hear things. Whispers, footsteps that don't belong to anyone visible, the faint echo of a lullaby that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The locals say the hill itself holds memory. It remembers every child left hungry, every promise broken, every name forgotten at dinner time, and it gave birth to something that would not let those memories fade. About 5 centuries ago, when Dutch colonizers and Chinese merchants built their grand houses along the coast and Javanese families worked the fields until their backs bent like prayer, a married couple lived on this hill. The wife, whose name has been lost to time, swallowed by centuries of retelling, was known throughout the village for her kindness. They say she had long black hair that fell like silk down her back and eyes that held the kind of hope only the young can afford. She tended her small garden with care. She helped neighbors when they were sick. She sang while she worked. Everyone agreed she would make a wonderful mother. But years passed, and her womb stayed empty. Month after month, season after season, no child came. In that time, in that place, a barren woman was considered cursed. Useless. A mouth to feed with no purpose. The husband, once loving, grew cold. He stayed away for long periods, leaving her alone with her sorrow and the whispers of the village. One day she followed him, through the bamboo groves, down the winding paths, until she found him in the arms of another woman. Younger, fertile, everything she could no longer be. Something broke inside her in that moment. Not her heart had been breaking for years. Something deeper, her sense of justice, her faith in love, her belief that loyalty mattered. Consumed by grief and rage at the betrayal, she killed him. Some say with a kitchen knife, others say with her bare hands. The details change with each telling, but the result is always the same: blood on the ground, and a woman standing over her husband's body, trembling with the realization of what she'd done. The village, when they found out, showed no mercy. Faced with the crime, angry neighbors gathered as a mob and chased her from the village. They threw stones. They called her demon, murderer, witch. They said her barren womb had poisoned her mind. Despairing at the ostracization and continual harassment, she wandered the hill for days, eating nothing, drinking from streams, sleeping under the orange palms. And when she could bear it no longer, she took her own life. But death did not bring her peace. Her spirit rose, not in blind rage, but with terrible purpose. If the living would not care for their children, she would. If parents could forget their duties, she would remind them. She became Wewe Gombel, the watcher, the taker, the judge. Semarang today is a city of two worlds. The rich colonial quarter glows with street lamps and the hum of air conditioners. Shopping malls stay open late. Cars honk through traffic. Life moves fast and modern. But climb the hill toward Gombel and the world changes. The roads narrow into cracked pavement and dirt. The air thickens with humidity and the smell of clove cigarettes mixed with cooking fires. Motorbikes sputter past crumbling shrines where offerings of flowers and incense still burn. Children play barefoot in the dirt, their laughter echoing off corrugated metal roofs. And then, precisely at 6:07 p.m., the call to Maghrib, the sunset prayer, splits the sky like a blade. The sound pours from mosque loudspeakers across the city, layering over itself in waves. And everything stops. Mothers pull their children inside. Not gently, urgently. Doors lock. Windows close. Not because of crime, Semarang is safer than most cities, but because of her. Because twilight is when Wewe Gombel wakes. Because the space between sunset and night belongs to her. Street vendors pack up early, even if it costs them sales. School teachers walk faster, clutching their bags. Even stray dogs slink into shadows, as if they too know something walks these streets that should not be challenged. The old women selling fried tofu by the roadside will tell you, if you ask. The evening prayer is not the time to be careless with your children. Maghrib is when she counts. She walks from house to house, listening. And if she hears a child crying alone, if she hears a name that has not been called, if she smells a dinner that has not been shared, she remembers. And she comes back. One vendor, a grandmother named Ibusari, tells the same story every time. My own daughter was taken once. Just for one night. We found her the next morning, wrapped in a shawl that smelled like rain and flowers we don't grow here. She was fed. She was safe. But she looked at us differently after that, like she knew we'd failed her. And we had. We never forgot again. One of the most talked about modern cases happened in the late 1980s. A boy named Budi, age 6, vanished from his home on a Wednesday evening. His parents had been fighting for hours, screaming over money, over blame, over whose fault it was that they could barely afford rent. The fight escalated. Plates were thrown. Doors were slammed. And through it all, Budi sat in the corner, silent, making himself as small as possible. When the shouting finally stopped, when the house fell into that terrible quiet that follows rage, the mother looked around. And Budi was gone. His sandals sat neatly by the door. His bowl of rice, untouched, still warm. The door was locked from the inside. No windows broken. No signs of struggle. It was as if the air itself had swallowed him. Or perhaps, more accurately, as if something had carried him away on a current of sound. The sound of a lullaby so soft it could only be heard by those who needed it most. The parents called the police immediately. Officers arrived, took statements, searched the house. They found nothing. Neighbors formed search parties, combing the alleys with flashlights, calling his name into the bamboo groves. But Bukit Gombel is steep and dark, and voices don't carry far when the wind refuses to help. The mother wept all night. The father paced, chain-smoking, alternating between guilt and anger. Why hadn't they noticed sooner? Why had they been fighting instead of watching? What kind of parents were they? At dawn, just as the first call to prayer echoed across the city, a neighbor named Pak Rahman found Budi asleep on a wooden bench outside the old shrine at the edge of the village. He was wrapped in a woven shawl that smelled like wet leaves and jasmine, a smell that doesn't exist naturally on the hill. His hair was threaded with pale fluff, kapok seed down from the arenga palm, soft as a bird's nest. His cheeks were clean, his belly full. Most strangely of all, there was a small bowl of sweet rice beside him, still warm, as if someone had just set it down. Budi wasn't crying. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't traumatized. When his parents ran to him, sobbing, he looked at them with calm, ancient eyes and said, "A woman sang to me all night. She told me stories about children who were loved. She fed me sweet rice with palm sugar. She said my mother and father still love me, but they forgot how to show it. She said they would remember now." The parents wept. They promised to do better. And they did. They stopped fighting in front of Budi. They ate dinner together. They said his name with warmth. Budi never disappeared again. But the legend didn't stay in the past. Modern families still whisper her name. And the disappearances continued year after year, each one following the same pattern. A house where love had grown cold. A child left alone at twilight. A mysterious disappearance, and a return at dawn, fed, safe, unchanged physically, but carrying a message. 10 years after Budi's disappearance, in a narrow lane off Gombel's main road, stood a house with a peeling blue door that hadn't been painted in a decade. Inside lived a family of 3. A father named Bapak Rudi who worked double shifts at the port loading containers onto ships. A mother named Ibuani who cleaned houses for the wealthy in the colonial quarter, and their daughter Lina, 7 years old, quiet as a held breath, invisible as air. Lina had learned, the way children learn to survive, not to ask for things. Not for dinner at the table. Not for bedtime stories. Not for her name to be spoken with warmth instead of exhaustion. She had learned to make herself small, to disappear into corners, to eat cold rice alone at the kitchen counter while her parents collapsed in separate rooms, too tired to speak, too broken to notice. The house was always quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the heavy, suffocating silence of people who have run out of words for each other. On the night she vanished, it was a Thursday. The father came home at 8 p.m., ate reheated rice standing at the counter, and fell asleep on the couch with the television flickering. The mother came home at 9 p.m., kicked off her shoes, and scrolled through her phone without looking up. Neither of them checked on Lina. Neither called her name. Neither said goodnight. The call to Maghrib had come and gone hours earlier. The blue door, as always, stayed unlocked. And the evening poured in like water, filling every room with shadows. Lina sat on her mat in the corner, hugging her knees, listening to the hum of the television and her parents' separate silences. And then she heard it, faint at first, barely louder than her own heartbeat. A soft melody, wordless, gentle, achingly familiar, like the lullabies her grandmother used to sing before she died 2 years ago. It came from outside, from the alley, from the place where the street lamp's glow ended and the bamboo began. Lina stood. She didn't think about it. She just moved toward the sound, barefoot, her shadow stretching long and thin behind her like a thread pulling her forward. At the edge of the light, between two trees whose roots had cracked the pavement, stood a woman. Not old, not young. Her hair hung like curtains of rain, black and impossibly long. Her dress was the color of funeral cloth, white, simple, worn. But her face was kind, tired but kind, like someone who had seen too much suffering and decided to do something about it. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft but carried a faint echo, as if she was speaking from two places at once, here and somewhere very far away. "Are you cold, little one?" Lina nodded, though the night was warm. "Are you hungry?" Lina nodded again, though she'd eaten an hour ago. "Are you lonely?" Lina's eyes filled with tears. She nodded a third time. The woman opened her shawl. It smelled like sugar water, wet earth, and rain-soaked flowers, like the kitchen on festival days when her grandmother was still alive. Lina stepped forward without hesitation and let herself be wrapped in that warmth. And for the first time in months, she felt like she mattered. At 2 a.m., the mother woke to use the bathroom. Something felt wrong. The air in the house was too still, too cold. She checked Lina's corner. Empty. The mat was there. The small blanket was there. But Lina was gone. Panic, sharp and sudden, cut through her exhaustion. She shook her husband awake. They searched the house, calling Lina's name with voices hoarse from disuse. The blue door hung open, creaking softly in the wind. By 3 a.m., the police had been called. By 4 a.m., neighbors were searching with flashlights. By 5 a.m., the father was weeping in the street. The mother was praying for the first time in years, and both of them were asking themselves the same terrible question. When was the last time we told her we loved her? At sunrise, just as the first call to prayer echoed across Semarang, Lina was found. Not by the police. Not by the search party. She was found by the same neighbor who had found Budi a decade earlier, Pak Rahman, now much older, walking to morning prayer. She was asleep on the same wooden bench outside the old shrine, wrapped in the same kind of woven shawl that smelled of rain and jasmine. Her hair was dusted with the same pale kapok fluff. Her face was clean. Her belly was full. There was a small bowl of sweet rice beside her, still warm. And when her parents ran to her, sobbing, collapsing to their knees, Lina opened her eyes and said simply, "She says you can do better. She says I deserve better. She says tomorrow you will try." The parents didn't argue with the police. They didn't question what had happened. They argued with themselves, with their guilt, their shame, their failures. They promised out loud to change, and they did. The next morning, they made breakfast together. They ate at the table. They asked Lina about her dreams. That evening, they called her name at Maghrib. They said it with warmth, with love, with the weight of a promise they intended to keep. That night, the soft melody passed by the blue door again. But it did not stop. It did not pause. It moved on, searching for other names that had gone unspoken, other doors that had stayed open too long. The house had changed its sound. So had the family inside it. No one agrees on what Wewe Gombel looks like. Ask 10 people in Semarang, and you'll get 10 different descriptions. But the fear they feel when they describe her, that's always the same. Traditional Javanese descriptions, passed down through generations, say she is a woman with long, sagging breasts. An image that may shock modern audiences, but serves a very specific purpose in the folklore. She uses them, they say, to hide children against her body, to warm them through the cold nights, to shelter them the way a mother should. It's not meant to be grotesque. It's meant to be desperately, tragically maternal. Modern depictions, especially in films and TikTok videos, sometimes add vampire-like fangs or glowing eyes. But these additions miss the point. Wewe Gombel is not a monster. She's a consequence. Other witnesses describe a younger figure, pale as moonlight, with hair that moves like water even when there's no wind. Her dress is white, funeral white, and torn at the edges, as if she's been walking through brambles for centuries. Her feet, they say, never quite touch the ground. She hovers weightless like smoke. Her voice is the most consistent detail across all accounts. Soft, gentle, but with a faint echo, as if she's speaking from somewhere far away, or perhaps from two places at once. When she sings, children follow. When she calls, they answer. Not because they're hypnotized or compelled, but because her voice sounds like love. And children, especially neglected children, are drawn to love the way plants are drawn to sunlight. Sundanese folklore says she dwells in the crown of the Arenga Pinata palm, the sugar palm, where she has her nest and keeps the children she catches. The kapok fluff found in their hair isn't random. It's evidence, proof of where they've been. But here's what everyone agrees on, from the oldest grandmother to the youngest street vendor. She doesn't hurt the children. Ever. She feeds them. She sings to them. She wraps them in warmth and tells them they are not forgotten. They are not invisible. They are not a burden. And when the parents finally remember to love them properly, when guilt turns into action, she lets them go. She is not a demon. She is a mirror held up to the family. And the scariest thing about a mirror is what it shows you about yourself. By the mid-1990s, Wewe Gombel was no longer a legend. She was a presence. Children vanished weekly from homes across Bukit Gombel. Always at twilight, always from houses where love had grown cold or exhaustion had replaced attention. The village elders convened emergency meetings at the old community hall. Taoist priests were called from the Chinese quarter. Islamic clerics prayed at the mosques. Christian missionaries left crosses and rosaries on doorsteps. Hindu families burned protective incense. But here's the thing about Wewe Gombel. Protective charms don't work on her. The traditional Jimit amulets, which are supposed to ward off evil spirits, had no effect. Red thread tied around doorways, useless. Blessed water sprinkled on thresholds, ignored. Because she is not evil. She is a consequence. You can't ward off consequences. You can only change the behavior that summons them. A shopkeeper named Ibu Ratna swears she saw Wewe Gombel one evening, standing between the trees at the edge of her property, humming a wordless song. A little girl, maybe 5 years old, walked toward her with her hand outstretched, mesmerized. Ibu Ratna blinked, and they were both gone. She ran to the spot. There was nothing but footprints in the dirt, small child footprints, and beside them, larger prints that seemed to hover just above the ground, barely leaving an impression. A schoolteacher named Pak Agus found wet footprints on his classroom floor one morning, small adult feet, leading from nowhere to the window. The prints smelled like rain and jasmine. He followed them to the window and looked out. Nothing, just bamboo swaying in the breeze. But when he turned back, the footprints were gone, evaporated, as if they'd never been there at all. A fisherman named Hendra claims he saw her floating above the water one night, her hair dragging behind her like seaweed, holding a sleeping child to her chest. He called out, asking if the child was okay. She turned her head slowly, smiled, not cruelly but sadly, and whispered something he couldn't hear over the wind. When he blinked, she was gone. The village began to change. Not because of priests or prayers, but because of fear turned into awareness. Parents stopped fighting in front of their children. Families ate dinner together. Doors were locked at Maghrib. And most importantly, children were called by name at sunset. Every sunset, without exception. And slowly, over the course of a year, the disappearances stopped. Wewe Gombel is more than a ghost story. She is a cultural safety net woven from grief and spoken in the language of fear. Think about it. In rural Indonesia, especially in the 1980s and 90s, there were no social workers, no child protective services, no hotlines to call if you suspected neglect. Families were left to police themselves. And when poverty grinds people down, when parents work 18-hour days just to survive, when exhaustion replaces affection, who protects the children? Legends do. Stories do. Fear does. Wewe Gombel doesn't punish evil. She punishes neglect. And neglect, unlike abuse, is invisible. It's the name not called, the dinner not shared, the door left open because no one checked. She is the reminder that arrives when parents forget. She is the consequence that walks on two legs. She is proof that sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones hiding in the dark. They're the ones we create with our own carelessness. That if you ever find yourself in Semarang at dusk, and you hear a soft melody drifting through the alleys, a lullaby with no words, a hum that sounds like the voice of someone you used to know. Don't follow it. Go home. Turn on every light. Set a bowl at the table for someone small. Say their name until the walls remember it. Say it with warmth. Say it with love. Say it like you mean it. Because Wewe Gombel doesn't haunt the wicked. She haunts the forgetful. And if you've forgotten someone you love, if you've let days pass without checking on them, without speaking to them, without showing them they matter, she will remind you. The question is, will you listen before she comes? Or will you wait until you find an empty bed, an open door, and a silence that screams louder than any ghost ever could? This story is based on Javanese folklore from Bukit Gombel, Semarang, Indonesia, dating back approximately 5 centuries. The legend teaches that Wewe Gombel abducts neglected children and returns them after parental repentance. Similar spirits exist across Southeast Asia, Hantu Kopek in Malaysia, reminding us that cultures create guardians where systems fail. This story is based on Javanese folklore from Bukit Gombel, Semarang, Indonesia, dating back approximately 5 centuries. The legend teaches that Wewe Gombel abducts neglected children and returns them after parental repentance. Similar spirits exist across Southeast Asia, Hantu Kopek in Malaysia, reminding us that cultures create guardians where systems fail. Thank you for watching Hong Kong Ghost Stories. Subscribe for more legends from across Asia. Leave a comment telling us, have you ever heard a lullaby you couldn't explain? And remember, some spirits don't haunt for hate. They haunt because someone somewhere stopped caring. Don't be that someone. Until next time, keep the lights on and call someone you love.